Well, I'm here with my good friend Shazad Sheikh for another episode of Brown Car Guys Therapy. That's what we're just going to call it. And I
And
think
to be
today
honest,
we need the
we
therapy.
need the therapy. This is therapy, actually. We do need it.
We do need it because we've just lost one of our own, the legendary motoring journalist Quentin Willson, formerly of Top Gear, The Car's the Star, and so many things. And I think it's a bit weird, isn't it, Shazad? They're two brown guys who are essentially, you're British, but I'm not. Why are we mourning Quentin Wilson, possibly the whitest motoring journalist around? Very posh, very upper class, not like us at all. But
No.
why do we
You
care
know,
about Quentin Wilson?
you say that, right? But it's quite interesting. I didn't know this until I saw some of the obituaries and stuff. But he was the son of Professor Bernard Wilson, who was one of the code breakers at Bletchley Park. So you don't get more British than that. You know,
A brown car guy. Brown car guy.
So, yeah, so when this story broke, this was on Saturday late afternoon, and I was literally at that point leaving, the UK's biggest classic car show, which is the NEC Classic in Birmingham. And this came up, a message came up, a friend of mine, Donnie, sent me a message. And I thought this must be one of those hoax things, this must be like, because every now and then you hear about this. And then I quickly did a Google and I was like, oh my God, this is real. Quentin Willson has died. And this one, I got to be honest, like celebrities come, celebrities go. It's sad to say. And at this point in your life, there's rather a lot of celebrities that probably heroes, not so much maybe for you, you're a bit younger than me, but certainly many of my heroes are now disappearing and dying and being cancelled and whatnot. But this one kind of hit different. And it hit very different. And I messaged you straight away, and I knew that you would find this as significant as I did. But it hit different because it's a weird thing. It's not that, I mean, I can't say that he was a friend or anything like that, but when I thought back, it's November in 2025. In December 2024, you and I spent the best part of a week with him.
Yeah, we were very lucky. We got to hang out with Quentin because I brought him to Dubai as part of the Millimelia, the biggest classic car event in the UAE, and possibly this entire region. And he was there as a guest. He was incredibly witty, charming, eloquent, loquacious, as you'd expect him to be. But he was also incredibly humble and down to earth. I've dealt with a lot of celebrities over the years in the Millet, and without naming names, some have been better than others. Some of them have been really quite challenging. Some of them have been quite wild, and those are the ones you want to tell the stories about later. But Quentin was just a perfect gentleman. If anything, he was better than his image on Top Gear would suggest, you know?
No, I mean, and it didn't surprise me because you and I had spoken before he came out there, and I'm very fortunate. I mean, I first interacted with him. I didn't actually meet him, but I first interacted with him probably. It was the early 2000s, maybe 2003, 2000, something like that. And I was working on Used Car Buyer, and the editor and the publishers completely revamped the magazine. I was deputy editor on it, and we decided to get some big name people involved. So we had people like Mike Brewer and what have you on there. But we also had Quentin Willson, and Quentin Willson was very often a cover star on the magazine. And he used to write a column for us. He was probably one of our most expensive writers, to be fair, but he was good. He was very good. And I don't think I ever got to meet him because the editor sort of kept that to himself. But I did interact with him via email because I would have to chase the copy and et cetera, et cetera. And you'd always have the case where I'd be sitting there waiting for the copy because the deadline was there and the production was waiting. And I thought, the copy's got to come in and I've got to check it, I've got to edit it, I've got to sub it, I've got to make sure it's good. And then but I used no need to worry because it did used to come in a bit late, just past the deadline. But when it arrived, it was perfect. It was like, drop it in, send it off. It's good to go. No issues whatsoever. So that's kind of first when I interacted with him. And then about 5 years ago or something like that, I met him at the EV show. I was hosting the conferences there, and I hosted him at the time for a day at the EV show. And I did an interview with him. And the amazing thing is I started, and I wasn't wearing my hat because I was working for the guys at the London EV show. But when I told him who I was, he kind of grinned and yeah, I've seen your stuff. And that alone to me was like, oh my God, Quentin Willson has seen my content. And, and I got him to do an interview with him and chat to him. And over the years, I met him quite a few times. And every time, he was so generous, in his time, in his patience. It's the sort of guy, sometimes, like you said, you meet celebrities, you don't know whether they want to be interviewed, whether they don't, you have to ask them. But you could stick a camera in Quentin's face and he'd be good value straight away and be happy to do it every single time. But he was, even when he was on the Millie with us, he did say, I remember, he said, I'm here guys, use me.
Yeah, he was just one of those people that once he said yes to something, he committed fully. There was no backtracking, there's no being precious, there's no, let's not do this, or let me check with my manager or my publicity person. And to be fair, I should also point out and thank publicly the person who brought him to us, who was Jodie Kidd, who of course presented with him on the Cars the Star, which at the time I thought was a very odd couple pairing, because she was this tall, statuesque model, right? And he was this very dry, witty, hardcore car person. And they were talking about classic cars. And the genius, or maybe the warmth and natural, honest, amazing personality of Quentin is that he advocated for her to be on the Cars the Star. She put up a lovely social post when he died saying basically he believed in me when everybody else said I couldn't do it. And I think that's a side of him that we didn't see on Top Gear, because the person we saw on Top Gear was very different. I would say very intelligent, very dry, very cutting. He didn't pull any punches. People think Clarkson invented a lot of those witty, pitty things, but actually it was Quentin. Do you not think?
No,
The
he was
whole
very
thing
sharp.
about
Oh yeah, I mean this is the
snapping
thing.
elastic, Nicker elastic at 200 yards, Quentin wrote that for Clarkson.
No, I mean, he was, the thing, back in the day, he was Mr. Used Car Guy, because he knew everything. You remember when...
But not like Mike Brewer. Not like
Not
that
like
kind
Mike
of...
Brewer. Like he had the knowledge, he had the patter. I said to you the other day, I think his character was sort of a combination between a very intelligent, a fiercely intelligent professor and a used car salesman. That's basically the combination of that. So he had all the fierce intellect of that with the smooth patter of that, and he could sell you anything. And he used to do these episodes on cars. I remember I just saw something came up on my feed the other day. And it made me laugh because it's the sort of thing that you and I would have done back in the day. I don't know if you remember this, but they once did an intro to a used car, it wasn't a used car, actually, it was the cheapest new car in Britain section. And they started the whole thing by doing a Blues Brother tribute. So they literally, he picks up Clarkson from the prison and they drive off with a Lada and he goes, what's this then? So literally they did the whole thing and it was very dry and it was very funny and it was just absolutely on point. But I think the thing about him is that why go back to your earlier question as to why is this one different? Why is it A, because we spent a lot of time with him, but B, because he was that personality who was actually quite giving. He wasn't these celebrities, like we had him with us. I had him on these conferences, but he was always there. He wasn't like, I want to be in the green room, don't want to be disturbed until it's my, no, he wasn't. He was like, I'll go and talk to people. He would, when he did his piece, he hung around for the rest of the day because he wanted to go around all the stands and talk to people and understand what was going on in the market. And then when he was on the event with us, he was the same. He was always chatting with people at dinner. As a celebrity, you always went, okay, does he need anything? Do we need to look after him? Shall we go check on him? But every time he went, he was there holding court. He was happy. He didn't seem to need anything. He was very, very low maintenance, if you like. But one of the things that will stand out for me, and this is one of the first things I think I said to you after we were discussing it online, upon hearing of his tragic and sad passing, too early, I say too early, was that on the last day of this event, you kindly asked me to host the awards for the Millie. And so I stood on stage and I did this, and the last guest was him as the chief guest as well. And next morning, we were due to take him back this was in Abu Dhabi, we were taking him back to Dubai. And so we met him early in the morning in the hotel lobby. And the first thing he came up to me and he was just so generous and so kind in complimenting me in terms of the hosting that I'd done the night before for the award ceremony. And which I said to him, I said, coming from you, that means a lot. And he was like, I wouldn't say if I didn't mean it, but if nothing else, that's one thing that I'm now going to carry to my own grave as a memory of Quentin Willson and the inspiration that he was for me.
But he was an inspiration to all of us who was in the motoring trade, which, contrary to our footprint on YouTube, is actually quite a small group of people globally. Like real journalists, influencers, there are a lot. There are a lot of JMs and there are a lot of seen through glasses, and they're all doing good work and they have audiences much bigger than us. But real journalists, people who started writing or presenting for television, not many. Because it was quite a difficult job to get right. To pass through that gauntlet is the proverbial camel through the eye of a needle. Because certainly the two of us couldn't get on the BBC. Certainly we had no chance. And even to write, which is the thing I wanted to do, it's very difficult, as you know, when you hired me all those years ago. But turns out Quentin was very much in favor of pushing people like Jody and bringing new voices onto Top Gear. He didn't always agree with all of them. Steve Berry was somebody he didn't particularly like, let's be honest. But I think Steve Berry had a bit of a challenging time on Top Gear at the best of times because he decided he wanted to take it over. And it was very clear that Quentin, Tiff, and Jeremy, no, let's not forget, were the original Top Gear trio. And they did this by having very bifurcated, very distinct personalities, which were not crucially manufactured.
No, this is absolutely the case. I mean, the Top Gear that people now remember, and they remember obviously for Clarkson, Hammond and May, but it wasn't Clarkson, Hammond and May that instigated this new version of Top Gear. It was actually, like you say, Quentin Willson, Tiff Needell and Jeremy Clarkson. And all three of these had actually joined the original format. So in the days of Chris Gotti and William Woolard and Tony Mason,
magazine program.
Yeah, which was just like a magazine, a typical small BBC, magazine program sort of thing. And they immediately set about, even back then, they set about reinventing it and changing it and stuff like that, and giving it the personality that it later took on. And it later sort of reformed around those three. To be honest, it was those three originally. It was Clarkson, Willson, and Needell. And it kind of formed around them. And of course, then they went away, and then Clarkson came back, and then you had the second generation, if you like.
I think I read something online on Pistonheads that says that Top Gear had three eras. Mm-hmm. The Ripon, William Woolard era, incredibly dull. You had the Clarkson.
It had its moments, to be honest.
Hang on, let me finish.
Just to intersect, there was nothing else for car people on TV, so it's like, but yeah.
Well, let me finish. You had the Clarkson, Needell, Willson era, which was informative, right? And then you had the Clarkson, Hammond, May era, which is daft, basically just madness. And I think all those eras had something to recommend them. I actually like the Woolard, Ripon, Chris Goffey era because it was very serious. It was very advocacy. And Quentin brought some of that energy. Clarkson brought that mad, puckish energy. And he changed the show just by being there and saying, let's not be so staid. The irony being that even though he thought it was cool, it comes across as very cheesy. All the leather jackets and the blue jeans, that stuff comes across as very dated. And I mean, Quentin tried to do that. You could see his wardrobe changing by the end of the decade, and he'd have some shirts. He wouldn't have a suit and tie. He had a tie way into the mid-90s, right? And that was very early Top Gear. He just never wanted to take off the tie. He always had a shirt, even on the Millie. But then when we get to the Clarkson, Hammond, May era, it becomes something else. It becomes very phony and very American and very... Look, that's the one that everybody knows. But I think the joy of this last week in the pain is that people are rediscovering the joys of Quentin Willson and Tiff Needell and Clarkson. Yeah. Oh, they were talking about stuff, but they were actually also funny. And they weren't just making shit up.
No, this was the thing, because that actually, if you think about it, was the perfect transition between that first phase of Top Gear, which, like you say, was a bit dry, was a bit newsy, was a bit very BBC, so Tomorrow's World sort of thing.
It's worthy, but it's hard to watch.
It's hard to watch, But and then you get the Clarkson, Hammond, May, which literally is just boys being daft, like you say, just boys being silly in cars, But that middle period was that transition where they carried that informative aspect of the original phase one of Top Gear, but then combined it with fun and entertainment and trying to make it not so dry. And I think that, and to be honest, that credit does have to go in large part to Clarkson, because I think Clarkson realized, as I did a long time ago, that, cars are not that serious. We all got into cars because cars are fun. And then all these journalists get into it, and they all get very, very serious and po-faced and very up themselves. And and the thing is, look, guys, it's just cars. It's not life and death unless you
Yeah,
crash
but
one.
you
Don't
know
crash it.
that.
But
Quentin, I wouldn't say Quentin saw it that way because Quentin was doing some serious work. He worked to reduce,
yeah.
make cars more affordable. He worked to,
Yeah, no, he
he
worked on a
extolled the
campaign
virtues
here
of
which
grey
was
imports, essentially. He was
yeah,
always on our side.
he worked on fair fuel. He campaigned for the consumer. He saved lots of money in terms of fuel costs and fuel taxes, and then of course he moved over to EVs. And I think a lot of people kind of sort of went against him when he did that, when he made that kind of transition.
But they
Although you
forget
got to
that he's
remember,
always been an advocate. He
but
always
he's
was
always been
advocate.
an advocate. But you got to remember that that transition didn't mean that he'd abandoned classic and traditional internal combustion engine cars. That just meant that he was doing the correct thing as a journalist, in that he was looking at the future and trying to see where it was going and what we should be doing, what we should be buying, what we should be thinking about. He owned 7 EVs himself over the years, so he was like, let me try the technology myself, and then that's the rest of it is his judgment, his opinion, his findings. He started to become an advocate for EVs. But as I can testify to, when I was with him at the Millie last year, we were standing on top of Jebel Jais, and I've got this on record actually. We were looking around at all this incredible, unbelievable, mouth-watering lineup of amazing classic and vintage cars that were there with us. And he looked around and he said, "This is life-changing." And I said, "Life-changing?" And he goes, "Yeah, this is life-changing." And he started to rattle off the names of all the different cars. And at that point, you saw that he never left that behind. He never left that passion or that interest or that enthusiasm behind. He was just somebody with one foot in the past, but definitely one foot in the future as well.
I think he showed us that you have to have many shades to your character and to be a really good presenter. And I think this is why influencers struggle. You can't be all things to all people. You have to keep trying different things, but crucially, you have to have an inner character. So, for example, if James May was suddenly, trying to be Tom Cruise hanging out of planes and stuff, it would ring false because that's not him. That's not him. And Quentin's inherent nature was, I want to drive luxury buses, I want to drive sedans, big saloons, and tell you about Jags and Lexuses. And he was a big advocate of Lexus way back in the day, right from the start. But he would also drive an occasional sports car or whatever and do stuff, but he was very clearly out of his wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But the point was the show had breadth and depth. You could mix and match these characters. An influencer now has to be equally excited about a classic car, about an EV, a supercar, a hypercar, and you have to bring that same energy. It's not possible to pretend to be all those characters.
But it's not just the energy. With people like Quentin Willson, it was the sheer credibility. You know what I mean? You trusted everything he said. You trusted that he was the man with the knowledge. And I got to say that as an editor that received his copy, and I don't know if he had a sub-editor or somebody helping him or whatever. It's possible. I don't know, because the copy was perfect. But ultimately, you knew when you read it, you knew those were his words. Because you know the way he spoke, you know the vocabulary that he used. So you knew those were his words. And you read through it and you thought, this is gold. This is gold. And this is around the time, I remember.
Incredibly clear voice. I have to say, though, you could read his copy, and it is a very funny cocked view of looking at the world. He'd look and stop and say, and he would raise that eyebrow, that famous eyebrow, and give a quizzical look to us. But you'd hear his voice while reading it.
You could. And the thing was, and here's the funny thing, because around the time we were doing that, and around the time I was getting his column, was around the time that phase 3 of Top Gear had just started. And if you remember, May wasn't on it. There was this other guy whose name I can't remember now, but there was
Jason Dawes.
Jason Dawes. So he was the used car guy, that was on the show. And of course, I was working at Used Car Buyer magazine, and I just come off Parker's Guides, which was also a used car consumer guide. So we knew used cars and we knew the market. And every Monday we'd come in after Top Gear had been out on a Sunday or whatever, and we'd just make fun of this guy Dawes, because we were like, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
That's a bit cruel.
I'm sorry, but everything he said, we would come in and we would just take it apart, because we're like, no, he was wrong about that. He's not right about that. That's not the right car. That's not the right price. We would just rip him to shreds. And the thing is, you could do that with a Dawes. You could never do that with a Quentin Willson. Because anything that he said, you'd be like...
Airtight.
Yeah.
Airtight.
And that's what you don't get now. That's what we're missing now, is that depth of knowledge and credibility combined with the authenticity and the ability to communicate, which is what he had.
But I keep coming back to that point, though, that he also didn't like stuff. He would call cars dogs or call them so pretty, like, Catherine Deneuve dipped in chocolate, stuff like that. He had these variances in tone, which were really important if you're going to be a presenter, and especially if you're going to be a good writer, because people come for different kinds of tone. And I think all the people who followed him, because let's be honest, Mike Brewer followed him, Elvis, all these guys followed him. They love everything. And I love Mike. I've interviewed him a few times now. He's great.
Mike is brilliant.
Mike is brilliant. And he's done his own thing.
And honestly, like, I hear a lot of crap, because there's a lot of haters, and I hear a lot of crap. And one thing I can say about Mike Brewer, having done, I think, 2 or 3 motor shows with him, was that the energy that guy brings.
Hardest working man in automotive is Mike Brewer.
Unbelievable.
But he does lean the needle towards used car salesman more than Quentin did, because Quentin would stop and say, let's be honest, guys, this isn't very good, right? Mike does his thing in a very different way. He's trying to get cars back on the road. So it's a very different mission, right? His whole thing is fixing cars and now flipping cars. But Quentin was about, got you a deal, but you're going to have to work for it. But come with me on this journey over the next 7-minute segment, and I think you can do it. And it all just seemed so effortless. If you worked with Quentin, you'd get a better deal on your car. You wouldn't pay his insurance. Very rarely was he a shit stirrer in the way Clarkson was. But when he did, you stood up and paid attention to it.
I think that's also, remember that we got to spend time with him. So aside from the personality that everybody and ourselves saw on the screen, we got to spend a bit of time with him. We got to spend a car ride from Abu Dhabi to
How lucky
Dubai.
are we? We got to chauffeur Quentin Willson back to Dubai. And he told us everything
And
about
what car?
everyone.
You should mention what car.
It was the 450 SEL 6.9 on 40-year-old tires, which we didn't know about at the time. What a great trip. And he told us about everything. I think you missed this because you didn't pick him up from the airport. Because I picked him up from the airport.
You picked him up from the airport, yeah.
And he was telling me, was it about the new Defender? You might have missed this, actually. The new Defender and Jerry McGovern, Professor Jerry McGovern, who designs the Defender. And I asked him, because we were talking about the Jag, etc., why does it look like that? Why does the Jag look like this blocky car? Why does the Defender look like this? And he's like, because Jerry likes it that way. And I asked, how do you know that, Quentin? He's like, because he was my neighbor. And he's just like this. And then he proceeded to tell an anecdote which I possibly cannot repeat on air. But he says, Jerry's like that. And it's not about anything else. He'll tell you everything in the world, but Jerry's like that. And is that good for Jag? Probably not. But Jerry doesn't care. And it's exactly what you wanted. You wanted a journalist to tell you really like it is, in a way that kind of confirmed your biases, but also opened the door a little bit. Because everybody has been talking a lot of stuff, I was going to say crap, but I'll just say crap, about Jaguar and why they're doing this and why they have to do it. No, it's because Jerry McGovern likes it like that. And he's been proven right. This Defender was a colossal success. His Range Rover was a colossal success. Are they Range Rovers and Defenders? No. Does Jerry care? No. Not at all.
And this is the thing, is the level of insight. And when you have somebody like that, you have the connection, the direct line to the industry's top people and stuff like that. And then the level of insight that somebody like that can give you is incredible. Like I said, that time we spent with him, we learned so much just over that time. But even here, when
we're in the industry, we are in the industry.
Yeah. Yeah, and then still we learn, because of course he's way better connected than either of us. But even here, when I'd see him at the EV show and stuff, and just even when I wasn't interviewing him, but I'd just meet him and I'd just stop for a 5-minute chat with him or whatever, and suddenly he'd open your mind to stuff and you go, okay, yeah, that's it. Oh, I didn't know about that. That's interesting, And even in the UAE, he was looking around. He had lots of time. I introduced him to Salman, who, as we know, is one of the earliest proponents of electric cars in the UAE. And I thought, I'll introduce them and then see what happens. And I walked away, and I think about coming back from something else. 20 minutes later, they were still deep in conversation, and it's incredible. And this is Quentin Willson standing at a golf club in the heat in the UAE,
Well,
chatting to somebody
I
for
think
20 minutes.
if I can go back to our conversations, many of which were private and in confidence, but I will say that Quentin was frustrated with the direction of the UK and the government, as many people are, because he didn't see it as being helpful to the motorist, a phrase which is kind of forgotten in the UK now because it's not about motorists, it's about mobility. But people are still in bloody cars. They need to drive cars places. They're not driving buses and trains, they're driving cars. And he fought for the motorists' right to do what they wished, but in a way that was still environmentally aware and feasible and so on. And it was just a challenging place. I think he saw the Middle East and the UAE in particular as a place where you could start afresh and you could erect policy at a very nascent stage that would be helpful to the motorist and make cars better. Ultimately, he wanted to see people driving cars. I think a lot of people in the UK don't want to see people driving cars. They want cars to go away and all of us to be just shuttled around in blobs. But Quentin wasn't like that. I mean, the last car that he owned, to my knowledge, was a 65 Mustang.
Yeah, no, he still
sold
had that.
everything else.
Because he sold everything, because he told us, didn't he? He sold everything else. He sold his E-Type and stuff, but because even the promo picture that he sent was him leaning against his Mustang. So that was the car that he still had. I think he still had a Mini. Did he still have a Mini, did he mention?
I think he said he sold everything except for the Mustang. Yeah. And that fits in with my theory, Mr. Shazad Sheikh, that the last car you and me ever own will be a Mustang, and probably a classic Mustang. The ride-out car.
God willing.
Yeah, exactly. In the UK, you might not be able to fuel it, but it's ULEZ compliant, if nothing else.
Well, this is the thing. Well, it is over 40 years old, so it will be ULEZ compliant. Yeah. Well, we could always get it converted.
It's not Sheikh Bank compliant, but that's a different problem.
Yeah, no, that's not happening right now. No. But I think again, talking to personalities and talking to celebrities, again, honestly, like this happened, this news broke, and I shared it with you. And then honestly, I needed a day. I needed like a day just to process this, and I don't know what it was, but I called. I think I called you up the next day or a couple of days later. I called you up, and I said, "Look, I don't know why I'm struggling with this one because this is not normally celebrities go and you go, no, well he's gone, no, well, so that's sad, But this one was like, oh my God, this is wow, and it felt like that we were just with him, and I think that was the real problem that I had in my head. In my head, I was like, but we were just with him.
I was thinking, because I could WhatsApp Quentin, and I just realized, you could do that anytime. But you can't do that anytime. I spoke to him, I think in May or April, last I spoke to him. He was very complimentary. He reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, keep in touch. What am I going to keep in touch with Quentin about? I keep saying this, what would I tell you about Quentin, what I ate for breakfast? But he was genuinely want to know. It's the shock, right? It's the shock of losing somebody that we had a personal connection to. Whether we knew him well or not is a different story, but I think we got a good sense of his character because we saw him behind the scenes and in front of people, and there was very little difference, if any. But also, and I'm not a particularly spiritual person, as you know, I think he was a big deal, and the universe kind of reconciles and recognizes that. I'll give you an example that's completely unrelated, but you still felt it. David Bowie. I'm not a big David Bowie fan. I know nothing about Bowie's albums from the 70s. But the moment he went, I was like, I felt it. I was like, that's a big one. Yeah. And in the same way, Quentin was a big one for us humble motoring journalists because he was one of us. And I think he was a little too accessible, if I can give some criticism to the great Quentin Willson at the end. Yeah. I think people thought they could talk to him. And a lot of journalists now have this very affected air. I won't name names because I don't need any more problems. But I think a lot of journalists are like, I'm too big a deal and I'm too unreachable. I'm a celebrity now. Maybe I can turn a car sideways or I'm on all these YouTube videos. But Quentin would talk to people. And a lot of people were like, Quentin, I can see him anytime. He's at everything. But he was a big deal. He was a genuine big deal.
Just to add to that, I would say that actually it's not so much the celebrities, maybe some of them. Like I've seen, some of the top name ones maybe you don't want to approach, but by and large, a lot of these guys, like I've met Steve Berry, I met Mike Brewer, I met Quentin Willson, and they were all actually quite approachable. It's actually some of the other ones, the newer ones, that are really like, oh,
Good
you don't want
point.
to, you know what I mean? The influencers and some of the more
You
recent
know
ones,
what? Mike
you don't,
Brewer, nicest man in the world.
yeah,
Honestly, nicest man in the world. So generous with his time. Clarkson has style. I think Clarkson always styled himself as a celebrity because
yeah.
he came from the go-go 80s. But all of the big presenters, I've heard nothing but nice things about Tiffany Dell, Vicky
Mhm.
Butler Henderson,
Yeah,
Jason
Tiffany
Plato,
Dale I've interviewed as well, and he was great. Yeah.
all of these people. John Bentley is a guy I'd love to. He's the guy who discovered Clarkson. Apparently,
So
very nice guy,
so
John
so
Bentley.
so so so
Harry
John
Metcalf.
Bentley,
Harry Metcalf is actually really nice when you
Harry
meet
Metcalf
him.
I met once or twice. John Bentley I meet often, and he I gave him a copy of the ULEZ files, and then he caught me at this a couple of years ago. He caught me at the NEC show just to tell me how much he'd enjoyed it and that he'd left a review as well. So it was really sweet. It was really, I mean, that's amazing to get somebody like that
John
saying, yeah.
Bentley, just like Quentin. John is such a legend. There's a Harry Metcalf video because he recently sold his Jaguar XJC for £140,000. Well done, well sold, Harry. He made some money, but not as much as you think because the restoration probably.
Was that the gold one? Was
That
that
was the
this
green
weekend?
one. That was the green one, iconic.
Oh, okay. It was, yeah. So maybe
Uh,
it was this weekend. I think I might have seen it, yeah, because there was
yeah.
one there.
So basically, he sold the car, and at the end, he did the wrap up. I've done very well. Very self-effacing as always with Harry Metcalf. And lo and behold, who walks past him behind camera, clutching a guide? It was John Bentley. And half
Right.
the YouTube comments like, "That's John Bentley,"
Yeah.
and he's just like, he's going somewhere. I'm like, "Hang on, Harry, that's John Bentley." And I'm like, I would have stopped everything. I'm like, John, get in here. That's the way we would have it. Like, John, you can't just be ignored. And I really feel like these guys are getting a bit lost, like Quentin. I'm so happy that people remember and loved him and adored him because he was very much appreciated by the industry, no question. But like these guys can't be forgotten just because they don't do YouTube videos where they point at things and go, my Jag broke down or I
Yeah.
bought a Range Rover for X, how much? We,
So
we
do you
need to
think that?
remember these guys.
So do you think we're coming to the end of an era? Do you think that this is the last of their kind? There's a few hanging on, but that's it.
It's the end of that era of really informative consumer BBC. And let's be honest, if I don't want to make it too dark, I think the BBC is under threat. As of the filming of this video,
It is. Oh, it is
Director
definitely, especially
General
with
is
recent events.
Director General has resigned. Everybody wants to see the BBC take. The BBC is under fire from everybody. Everybody
Well,
wants the BBC to
the
be
big
something
discussion
else.
right now, just to confirm that, the big discussion right now is about the license fee. Because we all have to pay a license fee. Whether we want to watch the BBC or not, just to have a TV, we have to pay a license fee, which goes towards the BBC. And people like that model is old. It's old and it's broken, and it doesn't make any sense. Especially when you look at the younger generation, they're not even watching terrestrial television anymore, but they all have TVs. So it's ridiculous. So yeah, when that funding is going to be pulled from them very, very soon, and when that happens, I don't know how they're going to survive because they don't have a business model like other channels do.
Well, they make a lot of stuff in revenue. They make a lot of revenue, sorry, from merchandise. Like Top Gear was so important for them, not just for the show, not just for the advertising, but because they sold so much Top Gear merchandise, pillows, toy cars, mugs. They made a fortune off that stuff. But the BBC is under threat, and it is the most trusted brand in journalism. It really is globally. It is the most trusted brand. And I think what the likes of your Nigel Farages and the like want is to take that brand and turn it into another Fox News, another GB News, another God knows what, lowest common denominator, marketing-led, business-driven. He said that they should have a businessman running the BBC. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And
No, it's
Quentin,
good.
by the way, Quentin also had his problems with the BBC because he did say they're very politically correct, but you had to learn to work around it. Jeremy obviously couldn't,
Yeah.
for his own reasons. And I think he'd outgrown the BBC by the time he left anyway. But they were under a lot of pressure. But
I mean,
is
that
the tension
that
of the
crash was
BBC.
inevitable. That crash between Jeremy Clarkson and the BBC, was inevitable because they were on different tangents, and every time you watch Top Gear, you're like, how can he get away with this? Because this is the BBC. So you knew that at some point, that would happen. Well, you didn't know what the resurrection would happen. It's incredible. Like, you get some of these people that just bounce back. And that resurrection with the Grand Tour was extraordinary. But that just naturally has run out of steam, really. And I think there was an Andy Willman, because he's doing some interviews recently, isn't he? Because he's got a new book out, and I
He
think
said that they were overworked and they were pretty much all burnt out by the time that happened.
yeah, and he's
Not an
he's
excuse,
also
but yeah.
said that he doesn't think that that Top Gear will come back. That BBC has no desire to bring Top Gear back.
Well, whatever they do, they'll be compared to it. They won't be compared to the Clarkson, Quentin, Tiff trio. They are now an entertainment program. But I would like to see that program come back. The problem is, because there needs to be somebody telling us whether cars are good or bad, whether you're paying the right price for a car,
Yeah,
how
but
to shop
yeah,
for
but
a used
Imthishan,
car.
don't you think that people are that's what the internet is for? You know, I don't think
It's not
people.
doing it.
Well,
But I don't think it's doing it because there is a whole bunch of people who are simply doing entertainment stuff. There are people, they're all balkanized. They're all broken into little bitty pieces of chocolate that we're all trying to find. To find the content which tells you how to shop for a car, you have to search for it. But the genius of Top Gear is that it will push it to you. You'd watch Top Gear and you'd see the new review of the McLaren F1 Steve, Tiff going, well, hey. Or in actually, Tiff made the McLaren look too simple to drive, and actually it's anything but, right?
yeah,
Apparently.
no, his first review of that was legendary. It was played on a loop at the Park Avenue showroom for years. It was
Of
incredible.
course. But then you'd watch Top Gear, and whether you liked it or not, you'd see a segment from Quentin on are you being ripped off by motoring manufacturers? And then you'd see Steve Berry riding a motorcycle. I don't care about motorcycles. I never have, I never will. But I'd watch the whole show. And they also wouldn't put it in the same order. So sometimes Quentin would at the beginning, sometimes at the end. So you'd have to watch the Steve Berry stuff to get to Quentin.
Yeah,
So they
true.
made you watch it was like feeding you vegetables. And
But,
now
but
people,
this is the problem, Imthishan. This is
This
why I
has
don't
gone
think
away.
this is why I don't think it'll work anymore, because I don't think that the current audiences have that. The audiences we have now are on-demand audiences. They want everything on demand. They're not prepared to wait for next week's edition of Top Gear and then to sit through 30, 45 minutes of it to get to the segment they want. They're not. They want it clipped out and on TikTok, by tomorrow. That's what they want. And that's why I don't think that a traditional terrestrial television program, a magazine style program about cars, I think it's done. I don't think it can be done anymore.
And I also think that a lot of the things about Top Gear, the Grand Tour kind of ran it into the ground, let's be honest. All the excitement and adventure of travel. The boys were very tired by the end of it. They looked tired. They were tired. But all the good ideas had been done, it felt like. Everything had been broken, smashed, burnt. And now people like Whistling Diesel were doing that. But there's nobody doing what Quentin was doing, which was advocating for the motorist.
Yeah.
Trying to make our cars cheaper, safer, and more accessible.
And that's a really good point, actually, because with all the current type of content that you get, largely influencer led, if you to be fair, they're all about check this out, check me out, check the car out, but none of them are about check you out. Which is what proper consumer journalism is actually about. It's like, well, what is your concerns? What are you worried about? What is the future of you and your car and your motoring and your driving license and your taxes? That's the problem. And we don't have that now. And I don't think we're going to have that now. And I think the likes of people like Quentin Willson were one of the last people that were still doing that. And it's kind of hard to see where that's all going to go, honestly.
A lot of people would ask the simple question, the most basic question in motoring, which is, what should I buy? And Quentin's entire career as a journalist in the writing sphere was telling people what to buy. And he was not particularly picky. It would be a Lexus or a Boxster. He'd tell you, this is worth it, this is not worth it, get into it, get out of it, etc. And his repetitive column was, it's always a great time to buy, whether the market's going up or the market's going down. It's always a good time to buy because you can still enjoy a car. You can't enjoy a painting. You can't ride, a $2 million banana stuck to a wall. But you can drive a car. Always. And at the end of the day, we're missing people like that. And I agree with you. The depressing thought is I don't think we're going to see anybody like Quentin anymore.
No, I think that we have seen the last of that kind, sadly. But, well, there you go. I think, I don't know what else to say, honestly. It's sad times.
Sad times, and I think we reflect that at least, two people, again, with two totally different backgrounds, and right now two different sides of the world, are talking about Quentin. And I think that is a tribute to how much impact he had on people around the
Yeah,
world.
but I mean, the thing that sort of, the common thread between us and other people like us that are talking about him is that we're all car guys. And I think that that's where it is. I think that, he was one of the heroes. He was one of our heroes. That's the trouble. And we haven't got many of them. And we've lost one. So that's where
We
it
lost a
is quite
huge
sad.
one. I think we're passionate about cars. We're not passionate about entertaining people or jumping in front of the camera or doing silly stuff, or breaking or smashing. We're passionate about cars because we all want to own them.
Yeah. Well, on that word, let's leave it there. Let's hear from everybody in the comments their own memories and feelings and thoughts about losing somebody like Quentin Willson. And so I don't know if this has been therapeutic for you, but hopefully it's been therapeutic for some of the listeners and the watchers. Hopefully we won't have to do another one like this for a while, but we'll resume normal service soon with our podcast, and we'll catch you soon on the next episode. Thanks so much, Imthishan, for joining me today.
Thanks for being here.
Hi guys, if you're enjoying this video, finding it useful, then don't forget to hit that like button and share and comment if you can as well, and support independent journalism channels like mine. You can do that at patreon.com, at coffee.com, or right here on YouTube you can take out a voluntary subscription. Or you know what, you can buy my books. I've got 3 out at the moment. One is a fantastic thriller, it's a novel, it's called The Ulysses Files. Go check it out, about the war on cars. And I've got a collection of short stories that's called Quantum Races, and that's out at the moment. And then this year I put out How to Be an Automotive Content Creator. It's about how to do what I do, and that's all of these are now available on Amazon. If you buy any of those books, I will be very, very grateful. If you buy all 3, I'll put you into a draw to win a unique and exclusive set keyring and brown car guy badge. There are only 17 of these left. There were only 20, 3 have gone out. There's just 17 left now, so hurry up with that. Anyway. Shout out time, guys. Thank you so much. Hey, if you enjoy my content, why not get involved? Buy me a coffee. You can do that at either of these links. Or if you're watching on YouTube, buy me a thanks or take out a membership. It all helps. It really does.